Hello. Welcome to episode 16 of Getting Your Ducks in a Row. This is another mine and Jay's roundup where we look to chat and go into a bit more detail about some of the discussions that we've had since we last caught up. This one's slightly prolonged. The episodes are becoming in thick and fast. So we decided to put this one off to get more episodes out. Let's kick off, Jay. Who was the first person you spoke to after our last case?
Well, there've been a few, and yeah, you're right. They have been coming thick and fast, which has been great. And we're getting people now sort of coming to us to request to be guests on the pod, which is brilliant. It's always nice when that transition happens. In terms of guests, so going back to the next person we had on after our last catch up, whenever that was, I feel like it was probably a good few weeks ago now. We had Richard Gill on from Paul Archer Design. So Paul Archer, they specialize in sort of high-end residential architecture. Sort of points to take from from the chat I had with him from that episode is how he balances sustainability with architecture and design, particularly in sort of large, older buildings, shall we say, which is quite interesting. And that is a theme, particularly when dealing with architecture and just sort of property development in general. Sustainability has been a real theme throughout.
Yeah, because if I remember rightly as well, the discussion was shaped around that sort of signature design that they had and balancing that in their moldability buildings and, as you mentioned, that sustainability piece, balancing all of that as they look to work and deliver on their clients' projects and their clients' work.
Exactly. I mean, it's not just designing an interior space or whatever it is they're designing that's high end and needs to be fit for purpose, look great, etc., etc. It's also how you do that sustainably, and that was something I found quite interesting.
And is that a piece that they lead with? Is that something that come through that's a USP for them, or is that something that they're sort of exploring to as sustainability becomes more of a talking point to build into their business?
I think it's both. I think you have to now, as a sort of general practice, a compulsory practice, sustainability has to be part of what you're doing. Whether the clients appreciate that or not, because, not every lay client understands the need for or pays much attention to the fact that, practices need to be sustainable. So I think it's both. But we are seeing a lot more sort of across the board, a lot more companies, businesses, service providers use sustainability as a USP.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because it's sort of starting to change a little bit, and from some of the discussions that I've been involved in with some of our clients, is that piece around sustainability is not necessarily becoming less of a tick box and more of a selling point than what it ever has been before. And I think that just sort of illustrates or certainly highlights the fact of where the industry is going, where it's less of a requirement and more of a want.
Yeah, definitely. And that sort of follows through to our next guest, which was Neil Wick of Property Connects, and soon I know from our discussions with him that he's sort of transitioning over to Cornwick, which is a purpose-led property investment model, and they are essentially providing care and supportive services, so things like care homes, affordable housing, etc., predominantly based in sort of Norfolk and Suffolk, but they are, say, franchising the business. That's not the right term, but they are looking to broaden what they do so it's accessible to the rest of the UK. But his model is very interesting because it's essentially allowing people to use spare capital to invest, so create an additional income stream by investing in property, but also not just creating wealth or additional income streams, but also putting their money to work where it actually makes a genuine difference. It's not just property investment, your classic buy-to-let property flips, which is, where Neil started and is still a part of his business, but moving on to, okay, how can we use this model to actually make a genuine difference to communities and help alleviate some of the pressure on our care and support systems? And the model that he has developed and is continuing to develop, and the types of projects that he is now involved in, are a real sort of eye-opener into how property investment could be done ethically, sustainably, and for the good of the community.
Yeah, it's got all of that traditional benefits from investing in property, but that added good feel good feeling, and knowing that you're giving something back in addition to that. So it's almost like an added extra if you are sort of looking to explore that route. He's definitely someone worth exploring. I mean, Neil himself, it come across in the podcast, his background and where he come from. I mean, it's quite an interesting story, isn't it? And how property inadvertently now being his focus, but back then was something that actually helped him get through, some difficulty.
Yeah, it was, he was originally in the creative industry and worked for some really big brands like Coca-Cola, Virgin, to just name a couple. And he built a business quite quickly in that industry and used some of the capital that he had sort of accumulated in that time to invest in property to provide him with an additional income stream. Now, when and he won't mind me saying it, he says it in the podcast episode, when he sort of got to a stage where he was burnt out from running a creative agency and the stresses of that, it was the property investment and that sort of secondary income stream that allowed him to step back from the business, the creative business, and sort of almost find himself again, gave him that support. And now he's into property development and property investment full time. He understands that perhaps need for a secondary income and how important that can be, particularly to business professionals. I mean, just generally across the board, but particularly to, directors and founders of businesses who are reliant on one source of income, and how beneficial it can be to sort of spread that risk.
Yeah. And I think from speaking to Neil myself is that there's a lot of flexibility in it. It's not just for people that have got hundreds of thousands of pounds tucked away. There is that flexibility in it, and that genuine understanding from his own experience that, if you can get into property, then it will only benefit you.
Yeah, exactly. And the point you made there in terms of the flexibility on the model schemes or whatever you want to call it that he has to offer, this isn't just millionaires, accessible to millionaires. This is genuinely accessible to a lot of people because of the way it's structured and the various tools he has available to him. He can put together deals for people that may have considered property investment but never thought that they'd meet the threshold, don't quite have enough capital or whatever. He's opened the door to these people, and also as well, the great thing about it, which I think is a great thing, is it's hands off. So you don't have to be a part-time landlord. And having dabbled in my sort of earlier years in property development, it is difficult. It's a ball ache, and to be able to invest and see a steady, decent return, which is guaranteed because it's backed by government contracts and 10-year tenancies, etc., and not have to touch it and deal with it and deal with all of the stress that comes with it is fantastic.
Yeah, and the confidence as well that you would have having someone like Neil and his team. And I think he puts quite a lot of pride and focus into making sure that comes across before any investment is ever made. I mean, he's not in this just to capture the money. He genuinely wants to make a difference, and he wants to make sure that the people that are coming on this journey and looking to invest with him and his team understand it. They're not going in blind, and this is all pre anything, and see the projects. Okay, cool. I think that Neil is definitely worth a listen to.
Definitely. Next up, we had Connor at Abode Architects, practice based in Scotland. Connor, similar principles to Paul Archer Design. So Connor's the founder and director of Abode. What I liked about my conversation with Connor is he had built his business up fairly quickly. I think he made the transition just after COVID, or whilst sort of the tail end of COVID. Built his business up, built a team around him, but then took time to step back and look at what he was doing and his priorities. And actually, rather than scaling the business up, which is what everyone's default is, obviously you want to build your business, you want to increase revenue, etc. He looked at what he needed in his life and scaled it back to suit him and his personal circumstances, which I thought was a really brave move. And hearing his story and his reasons for doing that were quite insightful.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because you're right. Naturally, being business owners ourselves, you kind of always. Well, I mean, it's down to the person, obviously, but you never really take that step to go. Actually, is this when you're in the thick of it? Is this where we want to be? Is this where we want to go? I think, like you say, the majority of people are always looking for that next step or the bigger thing. But to go, actually, well, my next step is a step backwards, or a step to the side, or however you want to deem it, to better my life and, take more enjoyment. I think that's really admirable. I think to have that self presence and that self understanding to go, well, this is what I need, and that is no detriment to me, and doing it, and it's still being very successful. That's the other side of it as well, right? Like, success isn't only in the scale of your business; it's in the quality of what you do, and he's still doing it really well. So yeah, hugely admirable.
I think what you say there about having that presence of self and understanding is key, because, like, we deal with, in what we deal with a lot of business owners who want to scale their business sustainably, sensibly, and in intelligent ways. Now, a large part of our job, particularly at the start, is understanding, one, whether there's a fit between us and the client, i.e., can we actually help you with whatever it is you're looking to achieve, whether it's getting past barriers or whatever it is. And then a large part of it as well is being a mirror for the client, almost, for them or the prospect, whatever, in discovery most of the times, to give them the platform to consider whether this is actually something they want as well. And it was good to speak to someone who had done that themselves and taken a step back, and not only done it, taken a step back, made a decision based on what was best for him, and then, rather than being put off because social norms are, like, you can't go backwards, that's the last thing you want to do, but then actually having the bravery to act on it was yeah, it's a hear.
Mm. Yeah, no, it's amazing. And just on that, like, did he share some of, like, the challenges in initially scaling the business, or was the focus just around what he's facing in the business today since he's scaled back?
Well, I think he scaling any business is difficult, okay? And it's, particularly when you're starting out, I mean, it's always can be a challenge. And at each point, no matter how big you are, if you're looking to grow, there are different problems that come with the territory. I think for Connor, he had built up some decent experience by being employed as an architect, built up his portfolio of clients, and the transition was sort of fairly gradual. So he was doing some private work, and then the business he was working for at the time sort of brought his hours down to give him more time to focus on his business. So, he still very difficult, of course, but he facilitated being able to grow his business, or the company he was working for certainly facilitated that quite a bit. And it's great to see an employer do that. I think it's more for him, it was the realization that this wasn't the direction he wanted to go in, and almost hyper niching down on, these are the people I want to keep my business at this size, and therefore I need to turn over this amount of money. And to do that, I need to work for these types of clients. And he's just really sort of focused his efforts on that. And it's working for him.
Next, we had Kane.
Yes, Quentin, visibly. Really enjoyed my conversation with Kane. He's so Kane sort of operates in health and safety compliance, mainly built environment, but there were other sort of industries he works in, like logistics and things like that, but essentially helping businesses navigate the world of compliance, particularly businesses that have sort of feet on the ground, and how their liability spreads in that way across its sort of workforce, and ensuring that its workforce is able to be compliant in a way that doesn't get in the way of them doing their job, and also highlights areas that their workforce may need training on, and then the resources to train them. Quite different to the types of people that we've had on, and the types of sort of pockets within the sector that we've had. But yeah, really, really great guy as well. Very, very knowledgeable. And hearing his journey as well, building the business and the funding rounds that he's gone through and how he's developed the platform was great.
Yeah. Oh, you mentioned there like the different pockets. I think as we go through this, is something that is sort of is obvious to us when we started niching within the built environment. But these little pockets of areas in the built environment that are not immediately obvious, and it kind of, I mean, it's partly the reason behind the podcast itself is to highlight the expertise and the characters within these areas. But you mentioned there compliance, and it's something that is, obviously huge within the built environment. So if I term this correctly, they're using software and SaaS as an offering to companies in the built environment to meet that compliance, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's the platform itself allows businesses to cover all of the different areas that are required to achieve compliance. For a lot of businesses, historically, compliance and health and safety in particular have come more to the forefront as time has gone on. You look at things like Grenfell and various, the Building Safety Act. A lot of these things have come at the same time and have shone a light on this type of compliance, health and safety, etc. And what they have built is something that allows businesses to, I say, tick all of those boxes. It makes it sound like, it's something they're just doing for the sake of it. But to be able to get to that point and streamline that process with it, that operations process within their business. And, he said, we spoke about some of the clients that he's worked with, and he sort of said, we go into a business and they'd have a spreadsheet for this and then a separate system for that and then something else over there, and none of it was talking to each other. It was all over the place. Different teams had access to different things, and it's not for want of trying. It's not that the business doesn't care about health and safety or compliance. It's not the case at all. It's just the implementation of it and the practicalities of it. And then there's, he spoke about, the workforce and having, people on the ground who are carrying out the work that their employer has asked them to carry out, but they carry a responsibility for health and safety and compliance. And how do you ensure that your workforce is singing to the same hymn sheet that the office is? And then how does all of that information feed back into one system that not only ensures compliance, but two, highlights areas that might need to be improved? So it's a one-stop shop, if you like. That's probably a really bad way to put it. I'm sorry, Kane. But it's something that is actually, not only does it tick the box in terms of, yes, this will help with compliance, but it's also streamlined in a way that it is usable. It's not a burden. And I thought that was great.
Well, there's obviously, for obvious reasons, there's a focus on health and safety for the reasons you've mentioned there, and having to be responsible for that and be able to do that well in the hope that, or hope's probably the wrong word, right? But in the professional process of making sure nothing goes wrong in the future is big, like that, having systems all over the place in that your best efforts to do it correctly can always lead to certain things slipping through the cracks, and the gravitas of whatever may happen because of that may be very minor, it may be massive. And I think putting a process or platform or whatever it may be in place to help minimize that, so that these things are eradicated to the best possible outcome is just a benefit to any company. But my point is there's such a focus on it, that being able to do it properly with confidence and then learn from the data that you're getting from it seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah, well, it's invaluable for any business that has involved in a service or delivers a service that has a huge element of health and safety, i.e. work, feet on the ground.
Yeah.
Whether you're working in infrastructure, logistics, whatever it is, you have a responsibility as an employer, as a company, as an operator within the industry. The safety of not just the people that are working for you, but of the general public is paramount. So yeah, it's to have it all there, easy to use, providing data that you can actually act on and making recommendations for you saves you a hell of a lot of work and time and money. So yeah, it's a great tool.
You mentioned earlier about Kane himself, his journey, the funding rounds and all of that sort of stuff. Is that where Visibly are now in terms of funding? What they sort of looking at now as a
No, so
business?
they've got a level of funding, and they are using that to further develop the platform. And so there are multiple sort of updates, and they're learning from the data that they're also receiving to help improve, from the various clients that are using the platform to help improve the overall sort of service. But it's a relatively new concept and company, and some of the clients that they're working with that have bought into this platform. I mean, there are some very, very big organizations that are already using it and adopting it and helping improve it as well. So, they're on a fantastic trajectory.
Yeah, as I say, it sounds like they're on a great journey. And then we had Steph.
Yes, Steph, Gusto Group, great guy. Really, really great guy. Enjoyed my chat with Steph. So Steph started off as a teenage DJ, and the reason I'm smiling is because he tells the story so well. And then sort of started in property development, was investing in properties, fairly small scale. I think he bought a flat and then converted it, etc. And has built now a business that is big, and it's a property development company. There are various pockets to it as well. It's transitioning into an EOT, so employee owned. He's also looking into he's sort of got a business. I think it's not necessarily attached, but it's part of his portfolio, if you like, that's looking at building materials that are more sustainable. So looking at hemp and things like that. He's also looking to AI. The factory that they use to produce these sustainable materials, companies just purchased. So he's really, what I like about Steph is he's very purpose driven, as sort of a bit of a link to Neil there, but he believes in building communities there was a reference in our chat to not just extracting value from a business, a community, the overall economy, but adding value. And Steph is very much someone who adds value wherever he goes, and he's not just there as someone who's just extracting and keeping for themselves. But yeah, great guy.
Yeah, I remember that part of the podcast where he's talking about extractors and adders to value within the communities, and it really stuck with me. The thing is with Steph, it seems like he's one of them guys that is very much on the curve or slightly ahead of it, really, with some of the conversation around hemp and the materials that he's sort of got within his other company.
Yeah, you're right. Not just in terms of the sort of hemp side, but just generally in the way that his company builds property is very innovative. He's huge on sustainability, huge on community building, huge on renewables, like a lot of stuff that you wouldn't generally expect as standard within the spec of a new build, particularly in terms of renewable energy sources, is included as standard. So he really is at the forefront of it. He's very, very passionate about it, and he's a great example of someone who not only is banging the drum for a better economy, a better engagement in terms of just building communities, making the world a better place, but sustainability is everything that he does within his business is actively contributing towards that. So he's not walking the walk, as it were.
I like that. So that takes us up to date.
Does it? Yeah, it does.
Yeah, Steph was the last episode to go out, I think, earlier this week. So looking forward, what we got? So I've got my first episode. I'm hosting my first episode with Angelos Kronos, who is the co-founder of Infrared City. It was a great chat. What they're doing there, climate solutions, using AI technology to help predict climates. Great platform, and generally, for me anyway, Angelos has a lot to add to this world, and he's very passionate about it, especially within the academia world, and how the younger people coming in and coming up through built environment can and will make the difference. So that, it was really enjoyable, that first episode. It took me a little while to actually commit and get one done, but I'm glad I have.
Yeah, and I know from speaking to Andros as well, he's a great guy. And what he and his team are developing, the tool, if you like, they're developing and giving the industry access to, again, sustainability, climate. It's it sounds like a bit of an innovation.
It's a hot topic, excuse the pun.
In terms of sort of generally who we got coming up, so we are branching out somewhat. we've got a guy coming on who basically runs a company that they specialize in safety solutions and rope access. They're based in Ireland. So looking forward to that. That is coming up within the next couple of weeks. We've got a couple of guys coming on who run a company that sort of, they specialize in structural investigations. So looking at GPR, various other tools that they have in their arsenal, which one of which in particular, I think I can say ICAM is, they've got exclusive access to that in the UK. So that's going to be a very interesting one. And we've also got a structural engineer coming on as well. So a sort of bit of a broader, or continuing the broadness, shall we say, of people, of guests that we've got coming on in the industry, which I'm sure will surface some valuable insight.
Yeah, absolutely. There is one more actually. It's one that I've recently booked in. However, it may not be one that goes live before our next catch up, but it's certainly one to listen out for because, as you said, it broadens that breadth of people that we're speaking to. They're a civil engineering firm, but they are solely focused on environmental consultancy and habitat restoration specialists. So it's a really intriguing one. They're an intriguing company, and will definitely be worth a listen when it comes out.
There we are, guys. I think that's probably about it, isn't it?
I think that's it. Yeah.
Cool. Well, as always, if you are interested in coming onto our podcast, get in touch. You can get us by email, hello@thedux.digital, or you can find us online. There'll be links and stuff in bios, descriptions, the usual places. But yeah, if you're interested in coming on, get in touch. Love to have a chat.
And until next time, thanks for listening.
Speak to you soon. Cheers, guys.
Cheers, bye.